Hello class, Dr. Mike here. So this is specifically from my Python CIS 2266 class, Python for Data Analysis. And it's sort of an extension onto lists. And instead of just talking about lists directly, which I might do a separate video on, just to give some highlights, I really want to show how we can incorporate lists back with ingesting data and back with variables and control flow. So if someone combine these previous topics using one of the course files, which is at mbox_short.txt. Now again, I'm not here to go over everything. There's really good documentation in the free textbook, Python for Everybody, which goes over iterations, functions, conditions, and everything. This is going to go in greater detail, specifically strings. There's a lot of string parsing we're going to come back to and visit, and other topics. So please look this over. But what I want to do is take one of the course files and just sort of go back to some previous concepts along with lists. So again, starting here, you can see we have this mbox.txt file, right? And we talked about this before for something in the file. So again, I'm going to call this variable line. And if it starts with from, it's going to print the line. I didn't print everything out. I skipped over that step here, as in the previous one. Just for line in MB file print line, we get everything. At least for now, we're going to do where we initially start, where we parse the file, and we get everything with the from in it. So I run that, I do get this right here. So again, it's good to maybe take this stepwise as you approach parsing and just verify the results. But in any case here, I have a list of email addresses with the from. So I think I've caught that. So we'll go ahead and go to now. We'll split out the emails. Now let's talk about splitting. Let's look at this previous list here. So because the line is a string, we can do some string parsing on it. What that entails is we can set our splitter. So we have a dot split, and we can determine our delimiter. So in our case, if we want to use maybe the colon for our delimiter, it's going to give us two fields. And just note, everything starts at 0 and 1. So if there was another field here, of course, we'd have 2, 3, and 4, and so on. So we can make this wherever we want. I think by default, it's a space, which probably would work. And this is the thing about this class and Python in general, and data parsing, data processing in general, is you might have a different approach than this. And really, as long as the end result is correct, the path you take with your code is really up to you, what you feel works the best. So I'm not going to get into the Pythonic part of it, what is the most Pythonic process. But for now, though, we'll take this here. So again, here we're using the dot starts with. So again, we have a string function here, and it's grabbing in with the from. So, and we're going to basically extend that. We're going to split out the emails. So here we can see email equals, so I create a new variable, and it's going to equal line, which of course we saw before, it starts from. And I do a dot split. Now again, I'm going to use the colon as the delimiter. And again, this is where you look at the help for the string parsing for dot split. And afterwards, I put in brackets here, which basically column do I want? In this case, I want column 1. So remember, always count at 0, always start at 0. If I was to put in, if I think 1, 2, if I put in 2, I'll get an out of range error because there is no 2 here. You can see it's empty. So now I print this new variable called email, and I got the emails. So again, very handy here. So we're putting some conditions. First, we're doing a loop, and we put a condition in front of it, if, and we do a string parsing, which it starts with, from, and then we create another variable called email, and equals line.split, and I'm splitting off this, and equals the first field after. So again, always remember, start at 0. So if I did field 0, I would get just a bunch of froms. So basically that number 1 right there. And if I do 2, it will probably give me an error. So So again, email equals this, and you can see it looks correct. So I'm pretty happy with the results there. So let's extend this even further. Actually, just run that. We'll keep that because we'll come back to it. Let's parse out the email source. Now again, when it comes to the very end of this, you might say, well, we could have done things a little more efficiently, and you definitely can. I think it's very stepwise. So you can see here, I ran this code. So I added another variable. So email equals, again, we have this from the previous one. And I say source. Source equals email.split. And I'm going to split at the @ sign here. And again, I'm using field 1. So if we look at our previous list here. So again, we create a parse here, and this is our delimiter. And this will be field 0, and this will be field number 1. So I mean, getting further down, I'm actually doing a little more in-depth splitting here. And of course, you can see the output's perfect. I got now. I have just the email source, and I'm going to call that source again. This is a new variable called source. I print source. It looks good. So now let's add in some lists. So again, lists I'll probably maybe do a separate video on, but I want to make this sort of an over. Again, I want to bring in the concepts of string parsing, looping, and lists. So, with lists, actually, I'm going to clear out the output here. I don't show that yet. So with lists, I'm going to create 2 empty lists. One called Umish and Burke, and this denotes empty lists, the brackets. So I got the same code from above, but of course I dumped the print source, and I added this block here. So I added some if statements. So if source starts with Berkeley, media.berkeley.edu, I'm going to do a burk.append. So again, this is a list. So if I do the list name dot tab, you'll get a list of things you can interact with that list item. Append, sort, index, and again, I don't want to get too much into lists. We'll go over some more functions of lists in a separate video, but I want to show you how I created 2 empty lists, and if I get Berkeley, edu, I'm going to append the list with that email address. This is from previous, we saw this previous on, this is from our previous splitting. Or if it starts with UMich, for University of Michigan, let's say, I'm going to append to UMich, and I'm going to print both out. So again, if I run this, you can see I have, now this is a raw list print here, so you can see there's the email address, and I do get the carriage return inside there as part of that. You can do some cleanup if you like. I'm not going to go into that further. We can look at more further string cleanup. rtrim, ltrim, for example, or we just do trim. You can trim off spaces, and you can trim off the hard returns. So this becomes an issue. It's good to know it's there, though, in my raw list. But again, you can see I have now 2 lists. Now again, to see those lists in a little bigger format, I can just do for M and UMIC, print M, and for B and Burke, print B. So pretty cool. So what we did was create a loop, which uses the lists. We open a file from external, and then we use a loop here to loop through the file, find everything that starts with. So we'll call it a filter. Parsing filter, I guess, could be the same terminology. I'm going to call it a filter. Everything that starts with from, and here I'm going to do parsing. I'm going to call this parsing, where I actually split out that line. Split it into item 1, give me the email, and then from there split it again, give me the source, and use that source as a parser here and say if it's equal to this, append it to this list. So this hopefully brings other topics. Again, other lecture videos will have some more detail, and again, don't bypass the documentation that came with the textbook. A lot of information here, really good stuff. It's going to get a lot more details, and of course, don't discount just the raw Python documentation itself from your Python help. But again, you can see here, just bringing these concepts, just bits of them. We have an effective parser, and we parsed out emails by source and created 2 separate lists. We didn't really go into writing out from files. I don't think the text talks about that. I could write out a list to a file, and that would enhance, and I would open a file for writing, and I would write out that list to it, and then I would close it, and I can have separate lists. Now again, this is a pretty small list here. Let's scale this up. Let's think 10,000 emails with maybe a couple hundred or more, 500 or more emails per university, multiple universities. So you can see where this little demonstration could be scaled up. And yeah, so we get to a couple thousand or more. Yeah, maybe this becomes a temporary holding point, and then I'll actually write those out to a source file on disk or into a database. Again, the outputs database, JSON file, XML, SQL database, flat file database. There's all kinds of options here. So in any case, that should end our demo here. So again, this is sort of a hybrid file parsing demo. I'll title it that. And it should hopefully give you some hints about bringing in the concepts so far as we look into parsing, which are going to be a very critical part of this course. Anyways, hope it was helpful. Thank you.